What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and this is eBay Miniature Rescues. Today, we're going to take a look at some Fyreslayers from Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So today we're taking a look at a bunch of models that have been sitting on my shelves for the last 3 years or so. In fact, there are quite a few models in this bunch that were my first ever tests with an airbrush. And why Fyreslayers? Out of everything that I could have looked into to start using an airbrush on, I picked the most random faction with the smallest canvas space in the entire game. When I first saw Fyreslayers, my thought was these models are just really cool. The orange hair, the generally angry dwarfish looks that they all have, and I had this thought that I could definitely bang out an entire army in no time with an airbrush. The overwhelming amount of skin made these models seem pretty easy. I figured I would load my new airbrush with some skin tone, spray them down, give them a wash, and pretty much call it good. And to tell you the truth, I'm still kind of on that line of thinking. But I've learned a lot about using an airbrush since these models came out. These models are really easy to overprime and overpaint. And what I mean by that is if you put too much paint on these particular models, most of their details will be lost very easily. These are really delicate sculpts, and not that they'll break apart, but that the details sculpted into each model is actually very small and shallow. So overloading these guys with too much paint will result in less than stellar results. Of course, I was shooting for something a little nicer than this, but you know, you gotta start somewhere. First time out with an airbrush, and I think I was getting a ton of clogs, not thinning the paint right, and you know, things that you do day one owning an airbrush. If you are in a similar place, just keep at it. It gets a lot easier, I promise. For me, for my personal army, I'm not overly concerned about the highest quality here. I want to be able to throw these guys into an army transport box and take them to a shop. So as long as the army is painted to a relatively good standard, I'm going to be pretty happy. And when we're talking about painting an army, having a consistent quality across a ton of models is always a better option than painting to a really high standard and just never finishing your army. As far as some of these already started models, I can give them a quick bath in 99% isopropyl alcohol, and with very little work, take all of the paint off. No sonic cleaner, no degreaser, just straight isopropyl alcohol. Weirdly, I just happened to come across this bottle at a local game store. They were selling 99% ISO bottles next to the Warhammer stuff. Can't even get 99% at a drugstore. Otherwise, LA's Totally Awesome is still totally awesome for stripping miniatures. I've been wanting to complete this army for a good while. So let's take a look on eBay and see what we can find for a good price that can help me do that. I still need a few more units to fill out the army, and I'm always hoping to find a good deal. The problem though, Fyreslayers have always been super hit or miss on the secondhand market. For the most part, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot. My guess is because this is a very limited army and there are only so many models out there. They only actually made so many boxes of these, and not that there are limited runs of those boxes, but there aren't any special editions or, army versus army boxes. Pretty much, they're just limited. So most of what you need can be gotten from start collecting boxes, which is nice because that means in order to have 2,000 points of Slayers, you only really need so much. For the most part, I do try and stay away from pre-painted minis for Fyreslayers specifically. In pretty much every case, the paint will be too thick and all of the models will need to be stripped fully. Of course, if you do find a particularly good deal, then that's great. But most of the pre-painted minis are going for almost the same as a box of new ones anyways. And that pretty much brings us to now. I want these models to be playable in a game, and in order to do that, I'm going to need to make a solid plan for the future. I really want this to be a straightforward paint job with some good contrast, and I want to keep the orange hair. I'm going to take a look at Google Images to see what kind of color schemes are out there and if there's anything that's going to jump out at me. Right out of the gate, there are some awesome alternate color schemes for our dwarves. If anything, these guys are great for just going nuts with whatever colors you're feeling that day. I still want that orange hair, but I'm liking how the ones with the dark skin look, almost like soot from a fire. That could be a cool combo with some black pigment powder to give that little bit of extra. I'm going to gather some inspiration and use these images to make something that will be kind of a speed paint army color scheme that can be replicated easily. Let's break down the model a little bit and determine how this could work. Generally, when I start with the airbrush, I like to decide what will look best if I can do only one thing with the airbrush. In this case, the skin would look the nicest if done with an airbrush. The transitions on the muscle groups will be much easier to do as far as speed painting is concerned, so we'll start there. I'm going to lay down a nice thin coat of Secret Weapon Tire Black. This color has a really nice hint of blue to it and will play really well with the orange hair. After that layer has dried, I'll dump out what's in the airbrush pot and throw in a little bit of that rubber highlight, also from Secret Weapon. This is the third step up highlight in a series of 3 paints, but mixing it into the base coat color will darken it down and give us a nice even transition. If we want to go even higher or do some brushwork to give focus to those highlights, then this color right out of the bottle is the best place to start. Once those layers have been put down, I'm going to switch to my Sotar 2020 airbrush, which has a very small needle and come in really close to punch up those shoulders. I thin down that highlight color even more and just rock the trigger back, letting a little bit of paint out at a time. We don't want to overdo it, just give it a decent highlight. I'll also hit the hands and the face to finish those off as well. The hair is going to be that awesome bright orange. There are of course 2 ways we can tackle the hair. We can brush on the orange. A couple of thin coats of orange shouldn't be too bad, but over black, that's likely to give us some trouble. In order to counter that difficulty, I put some of our skin highlight color into the hair. Now we have a lighter surface to work with and one that will help our orange look a lot nicer. I also threw some orange into the airbrush to try and speed up that process a little bit. Angling the airbrush up and away from other areas of the model, we can pretty much knock out all of the top hair. The beard is a little harder, but since I'm using this super small needle, I'll try and cover a little bit of the beard to make it easier on the brush. Once those are knocked out, I just go over each piece with a base coat of the same color. It covers much nicer and sticks without pretty much any issues, which really gives us a nice vibrant orange to start with for the hair. The metal was a little more difficult to choose. Silver is pretty neutral. Adding some rust into that brings in a little more warmth and contrast to the skin, but still a little bright for me. I like the dark skin with the pops of color, so I decided to mix some Vallejo metal color copper and burnt iron together. Something that looks really old, and I really love the way it looks with just a hint of that verdigris oxide on it. This is also a good option for the runes. A little old copper with some verdigris would be an awesome combination on the skin. There's still a little room to experiment though. I am going to try a few different things and see what I like best. Having that solid plan and knowing that the color combinations are something I actually like and want to paint will make completing an army a lot easier. One option was using a blue to white combo on the runes and in the eyes. It works with all of the other colors and gives the most contrast to the runes. Alternatively, using a red to orange would make sense, as well as just a regular metallic. So there are plenty of options when it comes to these runes. For making an army that looks halfway decent and for the sake of speed, I'm going to go with this blue option. It's really more of a green blue, but that matches with the copper a bit more and I like the way it looks on the dark skin. The last thing on these models is the cloth. There are a few variations that include metal bits, but each dwarf has a loincloth in the front and the back. Since they are almost naked, the little loincloths are pretty important and they deserve some attention. At first I went with a red color, something pretty dark, but that could be highlighted with orange to match the hair. I didn't really like that so much, so I switched to black. That was alright, but only if there were enough metal bits around it to help it stand off of the skin. I finally settled on Scale 75's Arbuckle's Brown. It's a purple brown that I really like for leather. It's got some nice depth to it, and highlighting it can go a few different directions. It also went nicely with the weathering colors, and once more brought in a little more contrast to the model, temperature-wise. Alright, so there were a few trial and error models in the mix, but nothing too over the top, and they can be fixed. I didn't end up going with anything too crazy color-wise, but what we did end up with is something that I'm actually really excited to sit down and paint. There's a little bit of free flow painting that can happen with each model, where the specific lines and folds tell me where to go. I can add a little more color variation using weathering, so there's fun to be had with each model. It's the kind of paint job where you can watch a movie, kind of pay attention, and still come out with some pretty nice looking models. If I'm in a hurry, I can cut some steps. and if I'm feeling good about something, I can continue and practice blending techniques or weathering on specific materials. This army is really flexible and should be really fun to finish, and I'm very happy with the results so far. The goal with these Fyreslayers was to have a pretty different color scheme, something that could be painted relatively quickly and have that fiery orange hair. I feel pretty good at where we ended up, and I'm looking forward to jumping in for more really soon. But until next time, please enjoy these smoky Fyreslayers. Thank you for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And not be so sick. Just bear with me.